Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When architect Kenneth Rollins finds a mysterious letter demanding $38,550 in HOA dues, despite his home not being in the HOA, it sparks a battle of forged documents, midnight sabotage, and a war for truth that will shake an entire neighborhood to its foundations. I remember the exact moment I saw the envelope. It was a Thursday morning, just after I'd finished my usual cup of black coffee and stepped out to check the mailbox. There it was, plain white, official-looking, with a neat return address printed in sans serif. Fletcher & Maddox, attorneys at law. For a split second, I thought maybe it was related to a zoning request or some architectural licensing update. I wasn't prepared for what I was about to read. Dear Mr. Kenneth Rollins, our records indicate you are delinquent on HOA dues and fines totaling $38,550. Failure to remit payment within 14 days may result in legal action including, but not limited to, property liens or wage garnishment. Sincerely, Fletcher & Maddox, on behalf of Spring Ledge Oaks HOA, attached was a spreadsheet. I scanned down the list, my eyes jumping between line items like I was reading the ramblings of a delusional accountant. Unauthorized structure, backyard pergola, $750. Unapproved exterior color, $1,100. Unpaid dues from 2014 through 2023, $24,000. No holiday decorations in 2019, $300. That one made me laugh out loud. I remembered that winter. I'd just finalized my divorce. Forgive me for not hanging up blinking reindeer when I was busy signing court papers, except this wasn't funny. Not really. See, I bought this house 9 years ago at a foreclosure auction. A solid 2-story brick colonial just outside of Austin, tucked at the far edge of the Spring Ledge Oaks development. But, and this was key, it was not part of the HOA. The original deed, the subdivision maps, the auction terms, even the county registry. Everything confirmed that this parcel was excluded. There was a narrow buffer lot between my property and the rest of the HOA-bound homes. That buffer made all the difference. Legally, I was Switzerland, and I had proof. A lot of it. Being an architect makes you obsessive about documentation. I had laminated copies of my deed. I had a certified boundary survey. I even had a notarized exclusion letter from when I first contacted Spring Ledge Oaks HOA to confirm I was outside their reach. Their then president, someone named Jeffrey Curtis, wrote back, and I quote, "Your property is not under the jurisdiction of the HOA, and no dues are expected." Dated and signed. So you can imagine my confusion when this firm tried to shake me down like I'd been freeloading off their landscaping fees for a decade. I spent the next 2 hours combing through my files and scanning everything relevant into a neat 30-page PDF. Then I drafted a professional but firm response, attached all the documentation, and emailed it to both the law firm and the HOA general email, then sent printed copies by certified mail. Done. Easy. Or so I thought. That Saturday morning, a new letter arrived. Same envelope, same tone. But now they were claiming the fines had increased to $41,700 due to continued non-compliance. They gave me 10 days to resolve all violations and bring the property into aesthetic. Alignment with community standards. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the insanity. Aesthetic alignment? What was next? Mandatory flamingo statues and synchronized lawn watering. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wasn't scared, exactly, but there was a pressure building behind my eyes. The kind that only comes when someone's trying to flip your reality upside down and gaslight you into thinking you're crazy for protesting. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just kept my head down, forwarded everything to my attorney friend Jeremy in Dallas, and assumed this was some clerical error. Surely someone at the HOA had confused me with another homeowner. Maybe a new intern plugged the wrong address into a database. Then, Monday morning, I stepped outside to grab the paper and saw it. In big red spray-painted letters across the bottom of my driveway, "Pay your dues." I froze. My mind went blank for a moment, then immediately snapped into cold clarity. Someone had come onto my private property in the middle of the night and vandalized it. This wasn't a clerical error anymore. This was deliberate. I walked the perimeter of the yard. Nothing else was damaged. No signs of forced entry. No camera footage. Yet. I made a note to change that. I called the police. The dispatcher was polite, took the details, and sent over a unit. When the officer arrived, a young guy, probably mid-20s, he took a photo of the driveway and scribbled into his notepad like he was logging a jaywalking complaint. "Does your HOA know about this?" he asked. "I'm not part of an HOA," I said firmly. "That's the whole point." He gave me a tired smile. "Yeah, we get a lot of these disputes. They usually go civil. Just document everything, and maybe file a claim if the damage gets worse." That was it. No patrols, no follow-up, just a report number and a shrug. I thanked him, even though my jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. As he drove off, I stood alone in the street, staring at those 3 words: bright, defiant, and smug. Whoever painted them didn't think I'd fight back. They were wrong. After the incident with the driveway, I didn't wait. That same day, I ordered a full surveillance system, 8 motion-activated 4K cameras with night vision and remote cloud storage. They arrived 2 days later, and I installed them myself before the sun went down. 1 covered the driveway, 1 aimed at the back gate, 2 on each side of the house, 1 inside the garage, and a bonus one mounted under the eave directly facing the street. I even added a discreet little sign near the mailbox. "Smile, you're being recorded." By then, the spray-painted "Pay Your Dues" had been power washed off, but a faint pink ghost still lingered on the concrete like an unwanted scar. I thought maybe this show of force, cameras, reports, and legal letters would be enough to send the message. I wasn't someone they could push around. I was wrong. 3 nights later, around 2 a.m., my house went completely dark. No lights, no hum from the fridge, not even the LED glow of the thermostat. Total silence. I checked the breaker box inside. Everything was fine. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside in my robe, cold air crawling up my legs. The exterior panel had been opened. Someone had pulled the main service disconnect. Literally flipped the lever on my meter to cut power to the whole house. My private utility box, mounted on my outer wall, secured with a lock I had installed. Except the lock was gone, snapped clean with bolt cutters and left hanging by 1 twisted prong. They didn't just want money, they wanted to mess with me. I called the police again. This time the officer was different. Older, polite, with the same bland patience people reserve for HOA drama. He took notes, nodded a lot, looked at the busted lock. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. I gestured toward the barely visible HOA sign 2 streets over. "I've got my suspicions." He gave a sympathetic smile, but his words were boilerplate. "Unfortunately, unless we catch someone in the act, this is going to be classified as a vandalism incident. Might be worth talking to your HOA directly, see if someone's taking enforcement too far." I didn't bother correcting him. What was the point? Instead, I replaced the lock, this time with a steel-coated shrouded padlock rated for maximum bolt resistance. And I added a trail cam to the utility panel. Let's see them try that again. The next hit wasn't at my house. It was on paper. That Friday, a neighbor, Terry from across the street, dropped a folded newsletter in my mailbox with a yellow sticky note. "Thought you should see this." Inside was the Spring Ledge Oaks Quarterly Bulletin, a cheaply printed leaflet full of smiley stock photos and HOA updates. Page 2 featured a paragraph titled, "Reminder, Community Harmony Depends on Participation." It went on to say that certain residents had failed to uphold the standards of the neighborhood and owed substantial back dues. It warned that non-compliance may result in enforcement measures. They didn't mention me by name, but they included a blurry, zoomed-in photo of my backyard pergola under the line, "Example of unauthorized structure." I hadn't spoken to Terry in years. We'd nodded in driveways, waved when taking trash bins out, but that was it. Now he was breaking the unspoken neighbor code to slip me contraband. That said something. The next day, walking to my mailbox, I got my first taste of public shaming. A woman walking her doodle gave me a sharp glance and pulled her dog tighter. Another neighbor, Mr. Lewis, who'd once asked me for roofing contractor recommendations, crossed to the other side of the street like I was radioactive. It was subtle, but not subtle enough. Word was spreading. That weekend, I got a call from a realtor friend of mine, Cheryl, who occasionally worked in Spring Ledge Oaks. She said a rumor was circulating among local agents that my property had pending legal restrictions and might be subject to lien action. That was nonsense, of course, but the very fact it was out there meant someone in the HOA was running their mouth. So I decided to go on the record. I sent a cease and desist letter drafted by my lawyer to both the HOA and the law firm citing harassment, defamation, and trespassing. I attached security photos, timestamps, and copies of the official boundary map. We gave them 10 days to respond, or we'd escalate. No response came. Instead, the next blow was bureaucratic. I received a notice from the city planning department stating that an anonymous complaint had been filed alleging unpermitted modifications to the structure, specifically unlicensed exterior construction, possible code violation. It listed the pergola, the garden shed, and even the solar panels I'd installed 3 years ago with a permit. I knew instantly who was behind it. I also knew my paperwork was in order. But still, I now had to spend an entire Tuesday digging up permits, filling out forms, and welcoming a city inspector to trudge around my yard like I was running an illegal meth lab under the roses. The inspector, a polite woman in khakis and a clipboard, seemed embarrassed to even be there. Honestly, she muttered, flipping through my permits, we get a lot of these from HOAs trying to flex over non-members. It's petty, but we still have to respond. That was the word for it, petty. But also methodical. They weren't just trying to find me. They were trying to isolate, intimidate, and wear me down. Paint me as the neighborhood pariah until I broke or gave in. But here's the thing. I don't break easy. By the end of the week, I had a map of the neighborhood taped to my kitchen wall. Pushpins marked incidents. Notes lined the borders. I wasn't just documenting anymore. I was preparing, because if this was war, I intended to win it by the book, down to the last notarized line. A few years ago, I spent 6 months overseeing a renovation project for a historical district in San Antonio. It involved layers of zoning law, property line verification, and, my personal favorite, digging through dusty records in county offices that hadn't updated their filing cabinets since the Reagan administration. That experience came flooding back the moment I realized I needed to look into the county land registry. The Spring Ledge Oaks HOA clearly thought I wouldn't push back. They assumed they could drown me in threats, maybe poke me into submission with some minor sabotage, but they underestimated just how obsessive an architect can be when it comes to boundaries, literal and legal. That Monday morning, I drove down to the Travis County Clerk's office and requested the full parcel history for my property. I gave them the address, my ID, and a smile that said, I'm either suing someone or writing a dissertation. The clerk, a woman named Brenda with leopard print glasses and a fuchsia manicure, was surprisingly helpful. She came back 20 minutes later with a manila folder, her brows raised. You've got quite the paper trail. Inside were scanned deeds, transfers, zoning notices, and a recently filed amendment dated September 24, 2016. That's when I saw it, a form titled Reclassification of Parcel for Inclusion in Spring Ledge Oaks HOA Expansion Zone. It included my parcel number, my name, and a signature next to the line marked Owner Consent. Kenneth Rollins, in smooth, slanted script. Except it wasn't my signature. I stared at the page, fingers going cold. I've signed thousands of documents, contracts, blueprints, affidavits. My name always looks like a sharp series of block letters with a flattened W in the middle. This one looked like it had been written by someone trying to fake sophistication. I had never signed this document. I'd never even seen it. You okay? Brenda asked. I nodded too slowly. Can I get a certified copy of this? Sure. Do you want anything else from the file? I hesitated. Any notes on who submitted the form? She tapped a few keys. Looks like it was filed by R. Hammer, Rose Hammer. Administrative filer, said she was acting as intermediary for the HOA's legal team. Hammer. That name rang a bell. I opened my phone and scanned back through emails. Sure enough, there it was, Rose Hammer, listed as the treasurer and bookkeeper on the last HOA mass email. I left the office with certified copies of every document I could legally obtain and called my lawyer, Andrea Nash, from the parking lot. Tell me you're sitting down, I said. By that evening, we were in full prep mode. Andrea went nuclear the second she saw the signature. This is criminal, she said flatly. Not just civil harassment anymore. You're looking at document forgery, false filings, and possibly fraud with intent to defraud a property owner. The next day, we drove down to the police department and filed an official report for forgery and falsification of a legal instrument. I handed over my certified documents and included a sample of my actual signature from a notarized closing statement. The officer, to his credit, didn't shrug this time. We'll escalate it to the Property Crimes Division, he said. This isn't just a neighbor dispute anymore. That night, I dug deeper. I accessed the Texas Real Property Database and began scanning boundary change filings from other properties near mine. That's when I saw it. 3 other parcels had been incorporated into the HOA at nearly the same time as mine, all within a 3-month window in 2016. I didn't recognize the owners, but I knew one of the lots. An old cottage 2 streets down, long vacant until a couple flipped it last year. I emailed the new owner, Sarah Lang, with a simple question. Do you know if your house is part of the HOA? She replied within the hour. We were told it was grandfathered out. Why? I asked if she'd mind checking her parcel record. 10 minutes later, she wrote back, wait, what the hell? It says it was reclassified in 2016. We had no idea. We met the next afternoon at a coffee shop near the lake. Sarah brought her husband Milo, and I came armed with documents. As soon as I showed them the reclassification form with my forged signature, Milo leaned back and muttered, Jesus, if they did this to you. We agreed to share findings. Andrea began reaching out to real estate law contacts, and I started building a spreadsheet with every parcel bordering the HOA's old boundary. Some properties had been added properly. Others, well, that remained to be seen. Later that week, Andrea drafted the lawsuit: forgery of legal instruments, property fraud, civil harassment, and defamation. We filed it with the district court and served Spring Ledge Oaks HOA via registered mail. Along with the lawsuit came an official demand: produce every internal document, email, and board meeting record regarding parcel inclusion decisions from 2015 to 2017. Their deadline was 10 business days. In the meantime, I went quiet. No more police calls, no angry letters, just silence. Because now I had what I needed, and if they thought forged documents and cowardly sabotage were going to keep me quiet, they were about to find out just how loud paper can be. Lawsuits are like renovations. You start with structure, move to demolition, then slowly, piece by piece, rebuild. Except instead of sheetrock and copper wire, you're hammering away with depositions, subpoenas, and exhibits. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find a beam that's already cracked, ready to collapse with just the right pressure. That crack came in the form of a shaky video file named HOA Meeting Jan 2017 to Move. I got it from Margot Pines, a retired teacher who lived 2 blocks east of me in a small Spanish-style rancher. I barely knew her, but she emailed me after reading an article in the Austin Tribune that mentioned my lawsuit. The piece was short, speculative, just a blurb about a homeowner in a legal battle with his HOA over alleged document tampering. It didn't mention me by name, but if you lived in Spring Ledge Oaks and had eyes, you'd know who they meant. Margot's email was short. I have something you might want to see. I used to be on the HOA's social committee. We recorded some meetings. There was one where Karen said something that didn't sit right. I kept a copy. Let me know if you want it. I responded within 30 seconds. She dropped a flash drive in my mailbox the next day. That night, sitting at my desk with a glass of bourbon and my laptop open, I watched the scene unfold. The video was recorded on a cheap camcorder with a built-in mic, slightly tilted, time-stamped January 12, 2017. The HOA board sat in metal chairs in someone's garage. Folding table in front, flags on the wall, coffee urn in the corner. There were 5 board members. In the middle, wearing a pearl-colored blouse and red lipstick, was the president of the HOA at the time, Karen Tingle. The sound was fuzzy, but clear enough. Karen leaned forward and tapped a printout. This house here, lot number 78. It's on the edge, never signed into the HOA, and the guys never paid a dime. Someone off camera asked, "What can we do about it?" Karen smiled, tight and smug. "It's unclaimed, technically not ours. But if we quietly adjust the map and file it, we can start including it in the assessment roll. He probably won't notice for years." Someone laughed. Another voice chimed in, "Is that legal?" Karen responded, "It's not illegal. It's just proactive." That word hung in the air like a fart in a small room. I watched the clip 3 more times just to be sure I wasn't projecting my anger onto her tone. But no, it was there. Smug, deliberate, rehearsed. I sent the file to Andrea. An hour later, she called, laughing so hard she had to put herself on mute before choking. "Kenneth, this is gold. This isn't just proof. This is premeditated fraud." She literally spells it out on camera. "It's not a signature forgery by accident. It's a coordinated strategy. This takes your case from strong to scorched earth. With the video, we filed a supplemental motion to admit new evidence, along with a request for a temporary injunction to freeze any further enforcement or collection activity from the HOA until the case was resolved. But the HOA didn't take it lying down. 3 days later, I got a thick envelope from their new legal rep, some boutique firm out of Round Rock. Inside was a formal letter of counter-allegation claiming that I had hacked HOA communications, manipulated board meeting footage, and instigated slanderous rumors about board members. It was pure garbage, of course, but it meant they were scared. The same afternoon, I got a knock on the door. Standing there was a man I hadn't seen in years, Matt Waller, former HOA vice president and apparently defector. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines under his eyes, posture a little hunched like he hadn't slept well in months. He asked if we could talk. I let him in, and we sat in the kitchen. "I saw the article," he began, "and the footage. I remember that meeting. I was there. I thought it was just Karen blowing smoke, but when she filed those new maps a few weeks later, I started to wonder." I didn't say anything, just let the silence fill the room. Matt shifted uncomfortably. "I know they forged your inclusion, and I think they did it to other people too." That was the second time someone had said it aloud. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed email thread. It was from Rose Hammer, the HOA treasurer, dated April 2016. The subject line, "Boundary updates, pending board approval." In the email, Rose wrote, "Karen says to make sure Lot 78 is flagged green on the next map. We're going to treat it as active from now on, regardless of previous status. Just update the file. He won't care." Attached was the map with my parcel shaded in, annotations in red ink. "Do you have the original file?" I asked. He nodded. "I saved it before I left the board. Never sat right with me." I asked if he'd be willing to testify. He hesitated. "I've got kids in this neighborhood, Ken. I don't want them targeted." "I get it," I said. "But if you don't stand up now, they'll keep doing this." He nodded slowly. "Let me talk to my wife." The next morning, Andrea and I held a strategy session. We now had a forged legal document with a fake signature, a video of Karen Tingle admitting intent to falsify property inclusion, an email trail between HOA officials discussing the manipulation, a former board member ready to testify. Andrea grinned across the table. "You don't just have a case anymore, you have a fun crusade." We filed a motion for early discovery and requested subpoenas for internal communications from the HOA dating back 5 years. And we weren't done. By the end of the week, 3 other homeowners, Sarah Lang, an elderly couple 2 blocks south, and a quiet guy named Victor who ran a home brew shop, contacted me with eerily similar stories. Each of them had no idea they were part of the HOA until they were suddenly fined or billed. It wasn't just me. This was systemic. But first, we were going to court. And Karen Tingle, she was about to be famous for all the wrong reasons. The courthouse in Travis County isn't exactly cinematic. Beige stone, flickering fluorescents, and vending machines that haven't been stocked since Obama's second term. But when I walked through those double doors at 9 a.m. on a Friday, with a USB drive full of smoking guns in my pocket and Andrea at my side, it felt like the world was about to tilt on its axis. The courtroom was small, civil, not criminal. No grand jury box or dramatic podiums, just a judge with tired eyes, opposing counsel who looked like they drank espresso through a titanium straw, and a few scattered residents from Spring Ledge Oaks who had come to spectate like it was neighborhood theater. Karen wasn't there. That surprised me, but Andrea leaned over and whispered, "She's smart enough to know she's the liability. They're sending in the pros." Across the aisle sat Calder and Bright, a sharp-suited pair of HOA lawyers who looked like they specialized in quietly making problems disappear until they don't. Their lead guy, Mr. Lyndon Graves, opened with a statement so slippery it could have been printed on Teflon. "Your Honor, my clients maintain that all boundary documents were filed in accordance with municipal protocols, and any errors were administrative, not malicious. Furthermore, we intend to challenge the admissibility of the so-called video footage on grounds of authenticity and privacy." Andrea didn't flinch. When it was our turn, she stood up, clicked her remote, and the courtroom lights dimmed. There, on a dusty projector screen, the video played. Karen, pearl blouse, smug smile. It's not illegal, it's just proactive. A few chuckles echoed. The judge didn't smile. He just narrowed his eyes and scribbled something onto his pad. Andrea followed with the notarized deed, showing my property was never part of the HOA, then dropped the printout of the email thread Matt Waller had provided. "And, Your Honor," she added, "we will be calling Mr. Waller as a witness. He served as HOA Vice President from 2014 to 2017 and is prepared to testify under oath that the inclusion of Mr. Rawlins's property was fabricated knowingly and intentionally." That changed the room. Graves requested a recess. The judge granted it, but added a note. "I advise counsel to confer seriously, because if these documents and testimony hold, we're moving toward fraud." Outside the courtroom, I leaned against the wall, pulse pounding, as Graves approached Andrea. "I assume your client wants a settlement," he said, slick as an oil spill. Andrea shook her head. "Not even close." He looked at me. "You don't want to drag this through months of hearings, Mr. Rawlins." I smiled. "No, Mr. Graves, I want to drag it through sunlight." They didn't like that. When we re-entered, the judge ordered an injunction. The HOA was to cease any attempts at collection, enforcement, or contact with me pending further review. They were also ordered to release all internal HOA documentation from the last 5 years for discovery. That's when the first domino fell. The next morning, a folder was slipped anonymously into Andrea's office mailbox. Inside were board meeting transcripts, handwritten notes from Rose Hammer, the treasurer. One line caught our eye immediately. Discussed extending boundary line southward past Lot 78 to increase dues base. Karen, if we fudge the files just once, we get 50 grand over 5 years. Fudge the files. Matt Waller agreed to go public. We scheduled a preliminary hearing and issued subpoenas for 3 additional HOA board members. At least 2 had already retired from their roles after the initial filings. One of them, Rick Armstrong, had moved out of state entirely. Meanwhile, things started unraveling for Karen. Word got out fast. Local news picked up the lawsuit. A small piece aired on Channel 4 under the headline, "Architect alleges HOA forgery in boundary scam." My inbox exploded. A dozen Spring Ledge Oaks residents reached out with nearly identical stories. Fake fines, mysterious inclusion, inflated fees for fences they never built. Turns out, Karen's little map manipulation scheme had pulled in over $120,000 in unauthorized fines and dues over 6 years. The HOA went into full damage control mode. They issued a public statement blaming past leadership for any irregularities and tried to distance themselves from Karen entirely. Problem was, Karen wasn't just past leadership. She was the architect of the con. I found out later she'd been named in 3 separate civil complaints by then. One homeowner, an 84-year-old widower named Jim Halley, had nearly lost his home to an HOA lien that turned out to be based on a forged debt record. Andrea and I drafted a motion to consolidate cases. If successful, it would become a class action lawsuit. Suddenly, I wasn't just suing for myself. I was suing on behalf of everyone Karen had defrauded. The stakes were climbing fast. Andrea called it litigation gravity. Once things start moving, it all accelerates. But the biggest shake hadn't hit yet. That would come in the next hearing, when we got access to Karen's personal email server, and that's when everything came crashing down. We didn't expect to get access to Karen's private email server, but when the judge approved our motion for discovery, citing potential evidence of systematic fraud, Andrea pounced. Within 72 hours, we had a digital forensic team digging through Karen's archived emails. What they found wasn't just careless. It was deliberate, and it was damning. There were threads titled Expansion Sketches, with attached PDFs showing property maps, some with altered parcel boundaries. In one email from late 2016, Karen wrote, "We can shift the lines 40 feet east. Nobody will notice unless someone brings in a surveyor. And who does that for lake lots?" Another email was worse. Sent to Rose Hammer. "File that deed form. Use the signature from the inspection waiver. His handwriting is close enough. We need that lot in by Q1 so we can hit budget." Andrea read that one twice, then exhaled slowly. That's felony territory. But it didn't stop there. There were lists of target properties with notations like elderly, less likely to contest, and rental owners out of state. It was a playbook for HOA land grabbing. Systematic, predatory, calculated. We printed everything. During the next hearing, Andrea laid the emails before the judge like they were bricks, one after another. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The evidence did the yelling for her. Mr. Graves tried to object. These are private emails. Questionable authenticity. The judge cut him off. They were pulled legally through discovery. And unless your client wants to argue someone hacked her own server to plant dozens of forged threads, I suggest you sit down. Graves sat. From that moment, everything changed. The court approved our class action motion. Karen was subpoenaed to appear in person. Rose Hammer resigned. 2 more board members lawyered up. Then came the kicker. Local news caught wind of the email content. They ran the headline, HOA scandal. Emails reveal targeted fraud against elderly homeowners. The phones at the courthouse started ringing. State regulators stepped in. By the end of the week, the Attorney General's office had opened an investigation into Spring Ledge Oaks for racketeering and mail fraud. Karen finally broke her silence. She called a press conference flanked by 2 lawyers and insisted she'd acted in the best interest of the community. But the community didn't believe her. Not after seeing the email where she called one homeowner a whiny relic squatting on prime land. Not after hearing that same homeowner, Jim Halley, had gone into medical debt trying to pay off an HOA lien she invented. I drove past the HOA office that afternoon. The sign had been taken down. The blinds were drawn. Karen's empire wasn't just cracking, it was imploding. The morning Karen was scheduled to testify, downtown Austin felt like it was holding its breath. I stood outside the courthouse, coffee in hand, watching reporters cluster like vultures at the front steps. The news vans had beat me there. Inside, Karen sat rigidly at the defendant's table, her hands folded too neatly, as if that could undo everything already laid bare. She was dressed for battle, navy blazer, hair pinned into a bun tight enough to whistle. But the calm didn't hold. Andrea opened with precision. She read Karen's own emails aloud to the courtroom, letting her voice ride the silence between each sentence like a blade. Then she called the county registrar to the stand. Did you process any boundary amendments or annexation requests for Parcel 43 in Spring Ledge Oaks? No, ma'am, not legally. We received one unsigned draft in 2016, but it was never approved or filed properly. Andrea nodded. So, if such a document exists in the registry now, signed and stamped, what does that imply? It's a forgery, he said flatly. Or was planted later. Graves, Karen's attorney, tried redirecting with a tired argument. These errors are clerical. Miscommunication at worst. Then Andrea brought out the video. Yes, that video. A recording from the 2017 HOA board meeting, where Karen, half laughing, pointed toward a photo of my house and said, "He doesn't even know we roped it in. Give it another month and send the invoice." You could hear the chuckles in the room. A board member even said, "Let's see if he barks before we bite." The courtroom fell into an uncomfortable hush. Then came the audible shift. A few gasps, the creak of someone leaning forward. Even the judge blinked slowly. That's when Jim Halley stood up in the back, the man they had called a whiny relic. He held up a letter from 2018 with a $9,000 lien demand and said loudly, "I sold my truck to pay this. You ruined my retirement." The judge ordered the bailiff to restore order, but the damage was done. The illusion of miscommunication had been shattered. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping, it was a targeted scheme. Within a day, Karen's 2 former board allies filed motions to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Their testimonies confirmed it all. The internal strategy to annex houses silently, to fine outliers until they folded or moved, to forge HOA boundary maps using outdated overlays and forged plats. The court ruled in our favor. Karen Tingle was found personally liable for fraud, defamation, document tampering, and civil harassment. The HOA as an entity was fined over $200,000 and ordered to compensate me and the other wronged homeowners. That wasn't even the end of it. The Attorney General announced criminal charges pending a grand jury review. Several state-level violations, some felonies, were on the table. Karen was taken into custody as a flight risk. I watched from the back of the courtroom as they led her out in cuffs, still in that navy blazer, still holding on to whatever dignity she thought she had left. Outside, Jim found me and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You didn't just win, son," he said. "You cleared the rot from the foundation." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and looked up at the courthouse steps, now empty except for a single microphone blowing in the breeze. 6 months later, the neighborhood looked different. Not just physically, though the old HOA sign at the Spring Ledge Oaks entrance had been torn down, and the glossy community bulletin board was now just an empty frame, but in the way people carried themselves. It was like someone had cracked open a window in a long-sealed house. A provisional homeowners assembly had formed, but this time it wasn't made of retired control freaks and self-elected tyrants. It was just regular folks, a retired firefighter named Mel, a widowed librarian, a single dad who worked night shifts. Their first order of business had been a vote, whether to dissolve the HOA permanently or rebuild from scratch under full transparency. The result? 89% voted for dissolution. No surprise there. The community had been bled dry for years, intimidated, fined, told how tall their grass should be and what color lights they could hang for Christmas. And now they were tired of all of it. Spring Ledge Oaks no longer wanted rulers, just neighbors. As for me, I finally painted my back porch that dark slate blue I'd been eyeing for years. No permission slips, no design review board, just me, a brush, and 2 cold beers. One morning, I put up a new sign by my front gate. It was simple, black and white, and bolted right into the steel. Not a member, never was. You try that again, and the next fine will be yours. I didn't think much of it until a few days later when a familiar figure stood outside the fence. It was Neil, my next-door neighbor, the one who used to pretend not to see me when I waved, the one who forwarded that HOA delinquency warning letter to the whole block. He looked different. No clipboard, just a paper bag with a loaf of sourdough and 2 dusty bottles of Zinfandel. "Hey," he said awkwardly, "you mind if I come in for a minute?" I hesitated, then nodded. He stepped inside, glancing around like it was the first time he had actually seen my house. "I was wrong," he said. "Back then, I believed what they told us. I thought you were the problem." I let the silence sit for a beat before answering. "You weren't the only one." He set the bag down on the patio table. "I'm not here to grovel, just figured it's time to stop being a coward." I cracked one of the bottles open and poured us each a glass. "Then sit." In the weeks that followed, others came around too. Jim invited me to a Sunday grill-out. Marcy, the one who once filed a noise complaint because my wind chimes were too existential, brought over a blueberry pie. A real one, not from Whole Foods. And somehow, in all that, the thing I fought for started to come back. Not just the deed rights or my property line, but the peace I'd been promised when I bought the place nearly 10 years ago. Quiet mornings. An open yard. A home I didn't have to defend like a castle. Karen Tingle took a plea deal. 18 months reduced for cooperation plus restitution. She wouldn't be holding clipboards again anytime soon. And the final irony. The story hit national news when 60 Minutes ran a segment on the dark side of HOAs. They interviewed me in my backyard with birds chirping in the trees and that same gate sign clearly in frame. After the cameras left, I stood alone on my porch, watching the sun settle over the neighborhood. For the first time in years, it felt like mine.